more is Mike Isaac, who co-wrote today's New York Times story about that employee protest. Mike, it's great to have you on. How unusual is it to see, I mean, I get the fact that it's virtual, so there's that, but in general, to see a walkout like this take place at Facebook, how unusual is that?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, there are obviously some logistical issues right now, considering everyone's on lockdown and quarantine, working from home. But, you know, we're talking about a company that I would say on the whole, save for maybe a few major moments in its history, has been pretty aligned culturally, doesn't really challenge executives and Mark Zuckerberg in particular. Unlike, say, Amazon, which we've seen a lot of different employee protests over the past few years, Google had a big walkout, a number of walkouts, at least based on a bunch of different criticisms of its executives. This is really rare for Facebook to sort of directly challenge, and even more rare for employees to sort of go off on their own and speak out in the open, especially on Twitter, which we're seeing now. So I think that kind of speaks to how tense things are internally and how strongly a lot of people feel about Mark Zuckerberg's decision.
It's interesting, Mike, that you mentioned that, because it also stood out to me how explicit some of this protest was. You quote in your piece one Facebook employee that tweeted, "It makes me ashamed to work here." And I guess taking it a step further, that the response from Facebook, from a spokesperson, again, you quote in your piece, was to say, "We encourage employees to speak openly when they disagree with leadership." I wonder whether this is now the norm, that we should expect public spats between employees and management.
I think, I think it's interesting. I think Facebook is generally a very locked down company, very controlled and on message. And I think that comms and policy is smart enough to recognize when the story is getting bigger and getting away from them. And so rather than cop to the idea that things are out of control inside, which frankly they are kind of getting to a point where they want to say, okay, we generally encourage employees to speak up. And I do think, though, to your point, this is, we've seen a few years now of employees at tech companies, especially, sort of banding together and creating these sort of quasi-unions, far behind the rest of the labor force in a lot of different industries. And I do think it's becoming more normalized.
Mike Isaac, thank you for joining us. And folks can check out, for more details about this protest, they can check out the New York Times and the article that he co-wrote.